History happened everywhere. Hello, my name is Ryan Weir, and I am here in the HHE studio with the hungry tyrannosaur to my long-necked diplodocus. It's Mr. Peter Goddard.
You're looking tasty there, my friend. Come over here a minute.
Get away from me! Now, Peter, last week the Derzolator gave you peace in Africa during the Jurassic. So what dynamite stories are you going to unearth for our listeners today?
Well, Ryan, we are headed to the birthplace of humanity to discover peace during the Jurassic period. We're going back, way back to when dinosaurs roamed the earth and flowering plants began to appear. Or did they? We're also going to learn the story of an engineer turned fossil hunter who discovered a significant piece of the evolutionary puzzle, and we'll take a look at a Jurassic giant with surprising elbows. Welcome to the mother continent. Welcome to the dark continent. Welcome to Africa.
All right, Peter, something about dinosaurs with elbows. That's what we were all expecting, frankly.
Exactly, sir.
But look, come on, Africa. Where the heck is that? I've not even heard of Africa.
Oh, there's little known place.
Orient me, sir. Orient me.
Well, it's always nice when our listeners get a location and they can say, ooh, that's where I'm from. Well, today, everyone listening gets a chance to do that because we're going to visit Africa, the source of all human life. So where we are all from, really.
It's what joins us all together.
It is, but do not try that with any border control officers. It will not work.
Right.
It's not a nation, of course, but a continent, so it doesn't have an official name. It is Africa. But you asked where it was, Ryan, and to find Africa, if you take a world map,
yeah,
look at the middle.
Right.
And there it is.
Right.
It's the big pointy down continent that, if you bend your neck slightly, kind of resembles the head of a rhinoceros, which is quite the coincidence, as it is indeed the home of the rhinoceros, which is, as we know, an endangered species, Ryan.
It is.
But I'm going to start us off with a little bit of good news. In 2023, African authorities estimated there were 23,000 rhinos across the continent, up on the previous year, 5%.
Well, that's very good. Good on you, rhinos.
Yay!
That means there's been lots of rhino sex.
Yay!
But you could say they're very horny.
Now, Ryan, it is the world's second largest continent after Asia. That's 30,365,000 square kilometres, 11,724,000 square miles.
What's that in Francis, Pete?
France is about 2.1% of the size of Africa, so you need 48 Frances to get yourself an Africa.
That is astonishing, actually, isn't it?
It's the world's second most populous continent, perhaps unsurprisingly. 1.4 billion people speaking over somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 languages.
Wait, what? 3,000 languages?
Plenty of languages to go around, for sure.
I feel like I'm never going to learn all of those.
No, perhaps not even one of them.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, Ryan, despite all those people, it is not commensurately wealthy. It's the second poorest continent by total wealth, but per capita, it is the least wealthy continent for a number of reasons, which will become apparent in the history section.
Okay.
It does, though, Ryan, have the most countries of any continent.
Ah, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah, there's 54 countries in Africa, from A to Z, Algeria to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Wow.
Now, these range from really big populations, 222 million people in Nigeria, to little tiny island nations, 107,000 people in the Seychelles.
Okay.
But it's not a nation, Ryan, so it doesn't have a flag and all those bits.
Does it not? Is there no continental flag?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because there is a thing called the African Union, which is kind of a club of the 55 member states of Africa.
Okay.
Now, have you spotted anything about that number?
Yeah, well, I was going to say something, but then I thought I'm being stupid, so I'll just keep quiet.
Try it, Ryan.
You said there was 54.
I did say that.
Then you said there's 55, so now I'm confused.
Yeah, I was confused too, so I had to look through the whole list trying to find who was different. And it turns out that a member of the African Union is the Western Sahara, which is a disputed territory. So there are people who claim Western Sahara does not exist, and therefore there are 54 countries in Africa. The African Union would disagree and include Western Sahara.
Right, okay. So what does their flag look like?
Well, their flag was adopted in 2010. It's a dark or a forest green flag with a white kind of sunburst image in the middle. And then on top of the white sunburst in green, but the same green, so it's kind of like it's picked out in negative space, is the outline of the continent of Africa. Huh. It's also got 55 gold stars around there's points of the sunburst of white colouring in the middle.
What do they represent?
Well, it'll not surprise you to learn it represents the 55 nation states.
Okay.
And they've got a song for us to enjoy as an anthem of Africa. So, should we have a listen?
I'd love to listen to it.
Let us all unite and celebrate together.
So this was composed by an Ethiopian poet called Segaye Gabramedine. This was a poem originally with music then added by Arthur Madogo Kamali, who was a Kenyan.
It's very Christmassy.
It is a bit, isn't it?
I'm picturing a bunch of school children standing outside my house in a snowy landscape.
So there it is, the not quite anthem of Africa.
Well, Merry Christmas, Pete.
Do they know it's Christmas?
No.
Other things that spring to mind for Africa, Ryan. Animals, of course. A classic African holiday is to go on safari.
Yes.
In search of the big 5 animals.
Right.
They were originally identified as targets for hunting, but nowadays, fortunately, people on safari are only shooting them with cameras. Do you want to have a little guess at which is which?
Lion.
Yes, the lion is one of them. Lions have tongues that have sharp, pointed rasps on them called papillae. So when they lick bones, their little tiny knives on their tongues are scraping the bone clean of meat.
That's disturbing.
It is, and but the good news is, by the time they've done that, they have already killed you long time ago.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Zebra.
Zebra is not one of the big 5.
Elephant.
Elephant is one of the big 5. Now, here's an interesting elephant fact. A lot of plant species in Africa have evolved seeds that must pass through an elephant's digestive system before they can germinate. So apparently, at least 1/3 of tree species in West Africa have to have gone through an elephant's digestive system in order to germinate and propagate.
So every time you see a tree in Africa, there's 1/3 of a chance that it's been through an elephant.
It's been pooped out by an elephant, yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Next one. Chimpanzee.
Chimpanzee is not one of the big 5.
Okay. The antelope. Wildebeest.
The buffalo, the African buffalo is one, I'll give you that.
Okay, thank you.
These are a social herd animal with a sense of vengeance. They have been observed killing a lion after it killed a member of their group.
Really? Wow.
So, if you owe an African buffalo money, you better pay it back, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, next one up would be the hippopotamus.
No, but it's a similar dimensioned beast. We've already mentioned it.
Oh, the rhinoceros.
The rhinoceros is indeed one. They've got very poor eyesight, Ryan, but a great sense of smell.
That's fun.
One more, Ryan, and it's a big cat. I'll help you out that far.
Cheetah.
No.
Leopard.
Leopard, indeed, it's the leopard. Leopards have been known to go into the water to hunt for fish, and apparently they even eat crabs. So those are the big 5, Ryan. You got it. The lion, the leopard, the rhino, the African buffalo, and the lovely elephant.
Ah.
Now, I'm going to finish on something that Africa is sort of less famous for, and that is what I describe as being normal. We often think of the savannah and the exotica and animals when we're talking about Africa, but it's important to remember it is a massively diverse place. It's got massive demographic diversity as well as landscapes. It's got big cities, small towns, villages, rich people, poor people, industry, technology, and everything in between. So we frequently have these default images of Africa in our mind, and I would like us to not entertain them completely and think, actually, there's much more to Africa than that. There is a modern Africa that we can engage with and talk about and visit today.
As you might expect in an area 48 times the size of France.
Exactly so, Ryan. Exactly so. End of section.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, Ryan.
You want to see my fossils?
Sure, why not?
Here you go.
All right, well, what's this then?
That is a coprolite.
Coprolite, that's fossilised dinosaur poo?
Yeah.
Oh, and this one?
Another coprolite.
Right, and this one?
More coprolite.
Ryan, are they all coprolite?
Yeah.
I see.
Good, eh?
I guess. Where did you get all these anyway?
The garden.
Our garden?
Yeah. I mean, I find new ones every day. They're just lying around on the ground. So I pick them up and I put them in this box.
Ryan,
What?
your collection is dog poo.
Well, that's not very nice.
No, it's not a metaphor. I mean, literally, your collection is dog poo. See, I've been looking after the neighbour's dog while they're away, and it's been using our garden to go to the bathroom.
Oh, so they're not dinosaur poop?
No.
And I've been collecting dog poo.
It does seem that way. I mean, Ryan, some of these are still moist.
Well, I thought that was because of the rain.
I mean, the smell really should have given it away too.
Wait, so what about all the bones I found that were buried in the garden?
Well, remember that pothole we hit when reversing the car the other day?
Yeah.
Well, long story short, we owe the neighbour a new dog.
All right, Peter. Well, I am fully oriented. I know exactly where it is. I know the size of it. I know what lives there. I know the theme tune. I know all of it. But what I don't know is its history. And there is a lot of history here, I'm guessing.
There's a lot of history and a lot of land. So this being an entire continent, I'm going to summarize really quite a lot, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
Now, about 4 to 7 million years ago, Ryan, there was a creature wandering around on all fours and he thought, you know what, I think I'm just going to stand up and walk properly.
Sensible.
That was the very earliest of early man, the earliest common ancestor between man and chimpanzee.
We finally met the very earliest man.
Yeah, Gordon was his name. Now, fast forward to 300,000 years ago, and evolution has worked its magic, creating a species we'd recognise as human, and this chap went by the name of Homo sapiens.
Ah, I've heard of them.
Yep, they first emerged in Africa, and you could recognise them by their factors such as bipedality, walking on their hind legs, that is to say, large brains, tool use, and the ability to have a mortgage.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Filling out all that paperwork. It took early man a while to get there, but finally.
Exactly so. Bureaucracy man, they called him. So yeah, history happened everywhere, but it really got started in Africa. Now, fast forward again, 60,000 to 90,000 years ago, some of these Homo sapiens decided it's time they expanded their horizons, and they went, I'm going to have a look at the rest of the world, and off they went.
Africa was feeling small, was it?
They burst out of their confines and went everywhere else, basically.
Okie doke.
Now, it's probably worth pointing out that there are different versions of the evolution of humanity. There is a multi-regional model, which doesn't think everything started in Africa, but it does seem to be actually most support is there for the out of Africa theory.
Also aliens, so...
Well, we can pick that up on the verdict.
If we want to talk about theories, Pete, I've got theories.
I bet you do. Hold those theories for now, though, because right now we're going to some stayed in Africa, not everyone left. Obviously, they were still hunting and gathering.
Yeah.
And by 10,000 BCE, they'd invented pottery, so they could finally have a nice cup of tea.
Hooray!
Although they hadn't invented tea yet, so that was a problem.
Hot cup of water.
3,000 to 4,000 BCE, they saw them smelting metals, including bronze, so finally they were able to reward people who came third in things.
Hey!
And also around this time, you start getting civilizations popping up. You've got Carthage, where Tunisia is today, Nubia around northern Sudan, and of course, ancient Egypt, which it's easy to forget is an African empire. Also around this time, Ryan, was the Bantu expansions. We've come across these before. The Bantu are a people mostly recognisable by a sort of common language. That's how they're tracked. And they kind of spread south from West Africa and down across, really pretty much across the whole of continental Africa.
Okay.
And then 15th century, Ryan, guess who comes creeping around the coast to find their way to sub-Saharan Africa?
Is it Portuguese?
It is the Portuguese, and where there are Portuguese, others are not far behind, as ever.
Okay.
So having said that, things remain mostly coastal during the 15th and 16th centuries. Europeans mostly live on the coasts and establish trading posts. They don't really run in and try and take everything over. Until the mid-1800s, a number of expeditions to Africa open the place up, and a thing that is known as the Scramble for Africa takes place.
Right.
So this is a situation in which European nations basically run around claiming bits of Africa, carving the place up between themselves, rarely asking anyone who lives there what they thought about the whole affair.
A dark time for Africa, would you say?
The beginning of a dark time, varyingly dark depending on who was taking you over, but certainly not ideal. Just to give you some sense of the scale of this takeover, in 1870 about 10% of the continent was formally under European control, and by 1914, so 44 years later, 90% of Africa was under European control.
Wow.
So basically the continent is almost entirely colonised. The various African countries were enduring various European countries running them, and by running of course we mean to various extents looting.
Yes.
Then the 20th century comes storming in with a couple of exciting world wars to keep things interesting. They affect Africa in fighting terms because North Africa was a theatre of war, but also African nations were supplying support to the war effort, especially people like the King's African Rifles, who were African citizens who fought in battles on behalf of the Allies.
Yeah, I mean, you don't often think of Africa as being a major player. You know, you think of the sort of the Allies and the axis of evil and all that stuff, but Africa was a huge part of it.
It was definitely part, and it's easy to overlook the contribution on the Allies side, particularly of the support we had from our African colleagues. Now, after World War II, we see a pattern that we've seen time and time again in all of our previous episodes where we've been dealing with Africa, which is basically after the war, some kind of rumbling. The exact timings vary, but leading to a rise in the effectiveness and the power of independence movements, often a bit of violent resistance on the part of the colonizer, always with eventual capitulation and independence achieved. And in fact, 50 countries achieved their independence by 1977.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. From there, it kind of varies nation by nation. Oftentimes, there are challenges that come with the arrival of independence, especially if there hasn't been much of a transition period. You see some rises of dictators, you see quite a lot of civil wars, you see quite a lot of international conflict. So it was not necessarily by any means an easy transition to independence. And on top of that, international organisations, big business, is always quite happy to show up and help whichever regime is most likely to help them profit, often resulting in less money finding its way to the people themselves.
Yeah, when you talk about colonisers, modern colonisation is still a thing. It's just done through business rather than through boots on the ground.
Exactly. Foreign direct investment for China grew from 75 million in 2003 to 5 billion in 2021.
Wow.
So what happens next? I don't know. It's certainly a place with absolutely bags of potential. It's ripe for growth and development. And so, as we do every time on the show, we wish the people of Africa all the best for a safe and prosperous future.
Go get it, Africa.
Go, Africa!
Do you ever wonder what's beyond the horizon?
Not really.
I mean, don't you just want to walk over there and see?
No.
I mean, just think about what we could discover. New animals to hunt, new plants to harvest, new cave walls to showcase our art.
Or it could all just be lava.
Yeah, it could just be lava, but, you know, there might be the opposite of lava. We just don't know.
Wait, what's the opposite of lava?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, water that turns into cold rocks.
Well, now you're just being ridiculous.
I mean, look, the point is, beyond the horizon are wonders beyond our imagination.
Maybe.
I mean, all we have to do is walk over there and claim whatever we find.
Walking.
Come on, come with me, out of Africa.
But I like it here, in Africa.
Yeah, well, you nearly got trampled by an elephant last week.
Well, that is true.
And when we've discovered whatever strange new lands are out there, when we've settled and civilized that wild frontier, we can return back home to Mother Africa, bringing all of our people back with us to live together in peace and harmony.
Well, that does sound nice, actually.
Yeah, I mean, what could go wrong? All right, Peter, well, look, it's about time you got down to business, and that is peace in Africa during the Jurassic. So why don't you tell us some fun and fascinating stories about those three things?
That sounds hard. So how about I don't do that and just, first of all, introduce us to the Jurassic overall. Let's orient ourselves in geological time. Ducking the problem? Yes, I am. So we'll have a little reminder of our context. So that in geological time, there are eons, of which there have been 4. And those eons are broken into eras, of which there have been 10, broken into periods, of which there have been 22 so far. Jurassic is a period. Within that, there are epochs. We've had 37 of those. And you can also have an age, which ironically is not very long at all on this scale, of which there are 96.
Wow, 96 ages.
96 ages. Now, the Jurassic is a period located in the Mesozoic era in the Phanerozoic eon, which actually is the same eon we are currently in today.
Wait, we're in the same eon as the Jurassic?
Yeah, eons are where you get to measuring time in rocks rather than animals and creatures.
Right. Okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, significant. So before the Jurassic, we have the Triassic, and after we have the Cretaceous. And there's a lot going on, Ryan. As we've said, it goes from 201 million to 145 million years ago.
Many things have happened since then.
And many things were happening during the Jurassic. In fact, Africa itself was making its way across the globe throughout the Jurassic. We start the Jurassic with a supercontinent called Pangaea, and this begins to split apart into a northern and southern half, Laurentia in the north and Gondwana in the south.
Yep.
So the north part then later breaks further and becomes North America and Eurasia. But the southern half, Gondwana, breaks into an eastern chunk, which goes on to create Antarctica, Madagascar, India and Australia. And then the western bit, this is our interesting bit, it will go on to create Africa and South America.
Okay.
So what was it like? Temperature-wise, things are getting warmer, and there's a new and dominant type of creature making itself felt, the big old reptiles that you and I know as dinosaurs.
Yeah, Yay!
Some of these were huge vegetarian colossi like the Brachiosaurus, and there was one that was at first believed to be the largest of the dinosaurs, called the Giraffatitan.
The Giraffatitan?
But sadly, Giraffatitan fell down the rankings, and the biggest dinosaurs are now a group known as the Titanosaurs.
They were big, weren't they?
They were massive.
I mean, like, you'd have to crane your neck to look up at them.
You'd have to look right up, but fortunately we didn't exist at all. But that said, it wasn't all lizards, Ryan. Mammals could be found, and this is way, way, way before early man, but if you look carefully you might just find early shrew.
Early shrew.
Early shrew, as represented in this case by Juramio, a little creature that was found in 2011 in China, causing much excitement because it showed that placental mammals, that's mammals that have a placenta and a cord attaching you to the mother, diverged from marsupials 35 million years earlier than we thought before.
Wow, that's a lot.
So Ryan, there's a lot going on in Africa during the Jurassic, but I know what you're thinking. What about peace?
Yeah.
So obviously this is very tricky. How do you do peace in Africa during the Jurassic? So to get us started, I thought we'd have a look not at the dinosaurs, but at the plants of the Jurassic, Ryan. And specifically we're going to ask, were there peas in the Jurassic?
Peas.
Peas in the
garden
Jurassic.
peas.
Yes, Ryan, that's what I'm doing. This is happening.
Okay. I mean, I see what you've done. I mean, I feel like this could be a yes or a no answer.
Well, yes, but no. A pea is a flowering plant, Ryan. It's known as an angiosperm, and I came across in my research a paper in the prestigious journal Nature entitled Fossil Data Support a Pre-Cretaceous Origin of Flowering Plants.
Ah, okay.
So this was answering the question, tackling the big question that I know you stay awake worrying about, which is when did angiosperm first appear on the evolutionary scene?
Honestly, I have fretted about that for many years.
Well, I'm here to help you, Ryan, because
Good.
one of the authors of this paper very kindly agreed to talk to me and help me find or not find peas in the Jurassic.
I love that. Okay, all right, cool. Well, look, we have a guest.
We do. So I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Phil Donoghue, and I'm a professor of paleobiology at the University of Bristol. My main interest is in trying to come up with methods for telling evolutionary time, and I'm interested in the origin of flowering plants because it's one of these iconic debates.
Professor Phil in the house. This is exciting.
I was absolutely delighted that he was willing to talk to me, and he was very kind with his time. So mega thank you to Professor Phil.
You should be glad if anybody talks to you though, Pete, frankly.
Well, there is that, but nevertheless. So Ryan, it's the classic debate, the origin of the angiosperm. But before we get started, I did ask for him to give us a quick description of what the Jurassic might have looked like from a more expert perspective than mine.
In the Jurassic, lots of the continents were flooded by very high seas because there was lots of new ocean crust being made as the continents were fragmenting from the supercontinent that had existed during the Permian and the Triassic. And in terms of life on land, we would have had dinosaurs and pterosaurs and early mammals, and in the seas, things like turtles. But amongst the floral communities, life would have been largely dominated by the gymnosperms, so the group that conifers and pines and ginkgos and the like belong to.
All right.
So there you have it. The angiosperms versus the gymnosperms, very much the sharks versus the jets of the Jurassic floral era. So there we have it. And I asked the professor to explain the difference between angiosperms and gymnosperms to me.
Well, so gymnosperms are basically the cousins of the flowering plants. Almost all living plants, living land plants, are flowering plants. They make up something like 90% of all the species of land plants that are known. So they should have originated at the same time. The first gymnosperms we find in the fossil record are over 300 million years in age. They're no less complex than flowering plants. They're just a little less showy because they don't produce the kinds of complex flowers, at least, that flowering plants produce. Given that there are literally hundreds of thousands of species of flowering plants and only 100,000 or so gymnosperm species, it would suggest that angiosperms are much more successful in some way. And people have been trying to get at that question by doing all sorts of complex analyses, but nobody really knows the reason why. Gymnosperms seem to make their genomes bigger and bigger over time. And some people have argued that that might be a brake on their ability to make more complex anatomies or to diversify into different species. But that's just an opinion rather than a fact.
So it's a paleontological mystery, Ryan.
I love a paleontological mystery, Pete.
But what we do know is at some point angiosperm arrived to outcompete the gymnosperms, but we're straying away from our question, Ryan, which is I'm still looking for peas, which are an angiosperm. So surely we can find a fossil of a pea, right? That's my next question. So Phil explained the problem with my thought there.
The fossil record, as it's conventionally interpreted, if you just read it literally, there are no fossils, unequivocal fossils of flowering plants until you get to some way into the upper part of the early Cretaceous. So it's something like about 120, 125 million years before present. But there is a record of the pollen that they produce that extends some tens of millions of years earlier. But that kind of stops as you get close to the Jurassic, to the Cretaceous boundary. But the question is whether that's a true record of their evolutionary history, or that's simply just the aspects of the fossil record that have been preserved. You can't preserve a fossil record if you don't have rocks in which to entomb those fossils, and that's particularly problematic for terrestrial land environments in the early Jurassic. There's not a tremendous amount of rock. We can go looking for fossil flowering plants. In my view, you have to interpret that fossil record somehow, and we've used a couple of different kind of mathematical techniques to try to get at the timing of origin of flowering plants based on fossil evidence, and sometimes combining it with genetic evidence as well.
Sounds to me like Professor Phil's got quite the complicated job.
He has got a complicated job, and I'm going to try and explain some more of it to you. But yes, the problem there, Ryan, no fossils. I'm out of luck there, but there is still hope because Professor Phil uses a technique known as the molecular clock. So one of the ways to find about things that were there in the past is to look at the fossils that exist. Mm-hmm. But the molecular clock is a much more clever, and I'll prepare you now, complicated and mathematical way of figuring out when things originated in the evolutionary time. I did ask him to explain the molecular clock to me, and this is what he said.
I hope it's all science and maths, Pete, because that's my favourite.
I would say strap in, Ryan.
Oh, here we go.
The molecular clock builds on the assumption that gene sequences, as they're copied from cell to cell and from parent to their offspring, they start to develop copy errors, so mutations within those sequences. And the process of acquiring those mutations is a time-dependent process. So if you look at the same gene from two different species of flowering plant, then the number of differences in their sequences, the number of mutations, reflects the amount of time since they last shared a common ancestor. So if there's relatively few differences, then you can conclude they shared a common ancestor quite recently. If there are lots and lots of differences in terms of the nucleotides or the amino acids that make up those gene sequences or those protein sequences, then you can conclude that they shared a common ancestor a long time ago. So the molecular clock tries to work out what that rate of mutation is. So it's a speed equals distance over time problem, the speed being the mutation rate. What you need to do is to convert those kind of numbers of differences within gene sequences between species into time. And you do that by getting some fossil evidence that allows you to constrain the timing of separation of one evolutionary lineage from another. So that gives you the mutation rate. And once you have that mutation rate, you can make comparisons between those same genes from the first two species to other pairs of species and estimate when they last shared common ancestors. And overall, you can end up with a time-calibrated evolutionary tree. And so in reality, we don't do this for individual genes. We do this for hundreds or maybe even thousands of genes all connected together for tens or hundreds or thousands of species. And we come up with an overall evolutionary timescale. And so people have been using the molecular clock as a methodology since its invention, actually in the 1960s, to estimate the timing of origin of angiosperms. And it always comes up with an estimate that extends some way either into the Cretaceous or even into the Triassic, which comes before that, or in some instances, even in the Permian, which is still earlier. And so the molecular clock method seems to indicate that the fossil record is actually quite a poor timing archive of evolutionary history.
So,
wow.
Take that, fossils. You're rubbish. We've got a molecular clock now. But you did a great job of simplifying, but I'm going to play it back to you again, Ryan, because there was a lot going on there. We've transmitted a great deal of information. So,
yes, please.
My understanding is you find a fossil ancestor that you know when it existed. And then you find 2 modern species that are descended from that common ancestor.
Okay.
And you see kind of how far apart they are genetically.
Okay.
And that allows you to calculate how quickly the rate of mutation to make 2 new species that are, let's say, 50% alike over 10 million years.
Okay.
So once you know that, that gives you the rate of change. If you take another different species and you find out they are 10 times more different, you can use your rate of change that you calculated to kind of track back to when these guys might have had a common ancestor.
That sounds sensible and smart.
Yes. And that is the simplified version. Apparently, it's much more complicated than that.
Wow.
So this is the molecular clock, but it is a little bit controversial. There's a little bit of a split between fossil people and molecular clock people, and Phil explained this to me.
You can't do a molecular clock analysis without fossil evidence. And so there are partisans like me. I'm ultimately a paleontologist, and I work with molecular and computational biologists to do these analyses, putting the best of fossil evidence and molecular evidence together to come up with an overall integrative timescale. But then there are the kind of the diehards who really want to interpret the fossil record as being literally true or a close approximation of it, and they will not have it that there are such monumental gaps in the fossil record as molecular clocks effectively predict.
Yeah, I can see why there is that conflict between the two.
Yes, so yeah, there's still plenty to fight about in the paleontological community. So a lot of work to do, a lot of papers to be written, I don't doubt. But Ryan, I think we've lost track of what we were doing here. We're here to talk peas.
Yeah, where's my peas?
Yeah, I just had to bite the bullet and ask the question of questions. Were there peas in the Jurassic?
Were you embarrassed when you asked him that, by the way?
No, I'm not that easily embarrassed.
Oh, okay. All right, well, let's find out.
Let's find out.
Well, since nobody can agree on whether there were angiosperms in the Jurassic, then, everything's tied up with that question. And so I can't give you, well, it would seem I can't give you a definitive answer, except the fact that peas are a very recent lineage of flowering plants that emerged, as cousins of things like lentils and soybeans. And their fossil record only goes back to the Miocene. So something like 5 to 20 million years ago. So definitely no peas in the Jurassic. That's one thing that perhaps everyone can agree upon.
Right.
So on the one hand, I have united the paleontological community after the divisions of molecular clocks versus the fossil record. I've got them agreeing again, but unfortunately I've got them agreeing that there were no peas in the Jurassic. So that's strike one, Ryan, but I have more plans, and I'm going to tell you about them after this.
Mum, what's for dinner?
Ferns, darling.
Ferns? But I want peas.
You can't have peas, darling, not until they're evolved.
Well, when's that going to be?
Oh, I don't know, 100 million years or so?
But Mum, I want peas now.
Darling, we've been over this. You can't have peas until the fossil record turns to the Miocene.
The molecular clock would let me.
Oh, right, that's enough out of you. We're having ferns and I expect you to eat them all.
Fine, but can I at least have some chicken with it?
What did I tell you about eating chickens? We have to...
Wait until something evolves into a chicken, I know.
Exactly.
God, I hate the Jurassic. All right, Pete, well, talk to me about some actual peace.
Right, well, with the loss of the peas angle, which I thought was going to be genius, turned out to be, sadly, a bust. We're still in search of peace in Africa during the Jurassic. So let us go to Scotland in 1797.
I mean, of course.
A boy is born, young Andrew Geddes Bain. Now, sadly, both of Andrew's parents died and he was raised by his aunt near Edinburgh, where he was educated. Then, in 1816, his uncle, who was a soldier, travelled to his new station in South Africa.
Ooh, okay.
Here we go. We're now in Africa. Now, Andrew Geddes Bain made his way to a town called Graaf Reinet, where he became a saddler, he became a hunter and an explorer. And in 1832, he offered to construct a pass in an area north of the town.
Okay.
Now, I'm not really clear what is involved in constructing a pass. I guess it's just digging and blowing up rocks so that you have a pass through some hills.
Yeah.
But I would remind you that I did say he was educated, but he wasn't a trained engineer or anything. He was just, I guess, hacking his way through the hills.
Had access to a lot of demolition material.
I guess, yeah.
Seems a very odd thing to choose to do if you have no experience or education in it, but I mean, I guess it was needed.
This is after he was a saddler and a hunter and an explorer, so this was a man willing to take on a new challenge, for sure.
I guess so.
So, just again to talk about his diverse career, he then becomes a captain in the army, he becomes a farmer, then he gets another job in the military, he becomes an assistant to a major in the Corps of Engineers.
Finally.
Finally, his talent meets a bit of training, and he was put in pass of making another pass, a place called the Eka Pass.
Yeah, I think he just likes making passes.
He does like making passes. He also built a bridge across the Fish River, which at that time was the biggest in Africa.
Good for him.
Well, this is the start of a pretty impressive engineering career, but we don't really care about him as an engineer. That's not what we're here for. Because while he was creating these projects, he would, from time to time, discover things in the rocks that he was creating as he chopped his way through hillsides and whatnot.
Okay. I see where this is going.
You see, these were, of course, fossils, and they fascinated Geddes. He read up about them, he got a book, he developed a collection of fossils and notes, and then he became ready to submit a paper that was received by the Royal Geological Society, who bought his collection and published his paper and gave him £220.
Whoa!
Big money. But one fossil he found in 1844 was particularly interesting, and he found it in the Karoo Desert, which is an area famous today for its incredible abundance of fossils. So he discovered a skull, but it was a really special skull because it was kind of a short-haired, it had a turtle-like beak, but it also had two kind of tusks coming down from the upper jaw, which he'd never seen anything like.
No, nobody has for many millions of years.
Well, indeed, and he sent this to the Geological Society in Britain, and they sent it to an eminent anatomist called Richard Owen.
Okay.
So Owen concludes the skull was some kind of reptile, but he hadn't seen anything like it before either, and he called it Dicynodon for the two big canines that were sticking down from the jaw.
Okay.
So this was a particular mystery because is it a lizard? Is it a reptile? Is it a mammal? Because it's got mammally teeth but lizardy beak. What is going on here? And this piece of the puzzle wasn't alone for very long. Further Dicynodon fossils followed the path to Owen's office. He got more and more of these, along with other fossils that also combined the sort of mammalian with the reptilian. And Owen was the kind of custodian of all of these fossils, and he named them with names that would kind of reflect this mammally reptile mix. There was a Galeosaurus, which is weasel reptile. Cynochampsa is dog crocodile.
Dog crocodile.
Lycosaurus, wolf reptile. And Tigrisuchus, tiger crocodile.
Right.
So what did all this mean, Ryan? What is this thing, this weird mix of the lizard and the mammal? Well, unfortunately for Owen, he was never going to find out because he was not a believer in the recently popular theories of Mr. Charles Darwin.
Okay. It was controversial, to be fair.
It was. He was not alone, in fairness to him. So what Owen never knew in his lifetime, but we today know, is that these creatures weren't lizards or mammals. They were synapsids.
What's that?
These are beasties that lived long before the first true mammals evolved, but they are a precursor species, you might say, to mammals. So sometime after lizards split off the evolutionary tree, but they're much closer to mammals than they are actually lizards. But they are their own thing, essentially, from the tree of life.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so Ryan, Bain's skull was an incredibly important piece of an ancient creature that was found in Africa. And do you know when it dates to?
Is it the Jurassic?
No, it's the late Permian and early Triassic, about 265 to 250 million years old. So before our time period even began. So that is another dead end.
Okay.
But let's go back to Andrew Geddes Bain, our paleantologist and engineer, and he was actually celebrated in his lifetime. He was made an honorary member of the Athenian Club, which is a private members club in London for men and women with intellectual interests and distinction.
Wow.
And it's still going today, Ryan, so we could apply for... Well, we couldn't. You need to be recommended. But
yeah,
if anyone wants to recommend us for membership of the Athenaeum...
It's never going to happen.
Do you not think? Come on.
No, I mean, literally no.
Well, let's see. Challenge for the listeners.
For what? You looking for peas in the Jurassic?
Well, we'd probably skirt over that pretty quickly. Oh dear. Well, no, Bain eventually died in 1864, but he is memorialised today in the form of Bain's Cape Mountain Whisky, which is a whisky distilled by the Sedgwick Distillery in Wellington, South Africa, and whose reviews include lovely and smooth.
Just like his passes.
Just like his passes, exactly. So here's to you, Andrew Geddes Bain, who found a piece of the evolutionary puzzle in Africa, but not in the Jurassic.
Pete,
looks like I'm going to have to try.
Do you understand what this episode is about?
I'm telling you the story of my trial and error, Ryan, but we're not done yet. We'll hear a little bit more after this.
I say, John, do you know that young filly who works in accounting?
Oh, yes, Miss Van Ryneld. I believe, in fact, you said you were going to make a pass.
And I did.
Good man, good man. How did it go?
Well, you could say I laid the groundwork.
Excellent.
Oh, yes, it took a while, but I like to think that I navigated that rocky path rather well.
Oh, gripping stuff. Tell me more.
Well, a gentleman doesn't discuss such matters.
Come on, man. Spill the beans, old chap.
Okay, well, first, I explored the terrain.
Oh, lucky you.
Yes, then I surveyed the surrounding territory.
Oh, you dog.
I even made some preliminary sketches.
Sketches, so scandalous.
Then I sourced several hundred tons of gelignite.
What?
And I blasted my way through several kilometers of solid granite.
Okay.
I laid a gravel path, and I named it Van Reinheld's Pass.
So if I understand correctly, you have in fact made an actual pass through a hillside.
Why, yes, of course. What did you think I meant?
I was under the impression you were trying to woo her.
Oh, good God, man, no. I'm an engineer. You won't catch me talking to girls. Ugh. All right, Pete. Well, look, the clock is running down. We've got to find some peace in the Jurassic in Africa.
Yes. Well,
Lord,
I'm going to have one more roll of the dice and see where we go.
Okay. What have you got, Pete?
So, in 2023,
Oh, no.
a team of paleantologists,
Okay.
led by Professor Jonah Schwanier
Yeah.
of the University of Witwatersrand,
Yeah.
published news of an exciting discovery.
Okay.
They had found in the Free State province of South Africa a piece of a new species of giant dinosaur from the Jurassic.
Hooray! That's fantastic.
They named it Ledumahadi Mafube, and this was the largest land animal that was alive on Earth at the time it was living.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
So this was 200 million years ago. This thing stood 4 meters high and weighed about 12 tons.
Okay, that's heavy.
That is heavy. One toenail, about the size of your hand.
Okay. That's very visual for some reason.
So the name Ledumahadi Mafube is Sesotho, which is an African language, one of the 2,000 to 3,000 that we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
It's Sesotho for a giant thunderclap at dawn.
Wow. That's cool.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So the lead paleontologist, Schwanier, he said the name reflects the great size of the animal, as well as the fact that its lineage appeared at the origins of sauropod dinosaurs. So this is an early Jurassic. Obviously, Jurassic's a long period, and the big ones evolved bigger and bigger through the Jurassic. But this was an early, gigantic dinosaur.
Yeah.
But did it like peace, Ryan? Yes, it did, because it was a plant-eating dinosaur. It had no interest in running around after other dinosaurs, disturbing their day. It was happy munching on a leaf, quite possibly an angiosperm leaf.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Most likely.
Some speculation involved in that. But what is particularly interesting is that in this early form of dinosaur, it's an illustration that evolving to become massive. So there are sort of evolutionary approaches one can take to survival, and getting big is one of them. And all these sort of Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus type dinosaurs were all part of it's not an active strategy, but what you could call the gigantism strategy. But there wasn't a single road to becoming big, and this dinosaur actually illustrates that, because when you look at its legs, they're rather different to the legs that you think of. When you're thinking of a massive dinosaur, I'm pretty sure you're thinking of a really big fat dinosaur with a long neck with 4 kind of little columns underneath him supporting him as legs.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Right, so the Ledumahadi has what look a lot more like kind of arms with this sort of slightly crouched stance. So
okay.
It didn't take that approach to supporting its body, if you like, but it still became massive. So it had to make these massive bones to support its massive weight. So one of the people who studied this creature said it was of similar size to the gigantic sauropod dinosaurs, but whereas the arms and legs of those animals are typically quite slender, Ledumahadis are incredibly thick. To me, this indicated the path towards gigantism in sauropodomorphs was far from straightforward, and that the way these animals solved the usual problems of life, such as eating and moving, was much more dynamic within the group than we previously thought.
Wow, okay.
So, Ryan, to conclude, this team found a piece of a peace-loving gigantic dinosaur that ate, not peas exactly, but vegetables, in Africa during the Jurassic. You're welcome.
Look how pleased you are with yourself. Well, Peter,
We got there in the end, eh?
We got there in the end.
Maybe the real peace was the friends we made along the way.
And on that, a huge thank you to Professor Phil for joining us.
Massive thank you. He explained some very complicated things in very clear terms. I found him an absolutely fascinating company, and I'm very grateful for his time.
You pleased with yourself, Pete? I could see it on your face.
I've been waiting so long to show you that I did peas in the Jurassic. I'm like, he's either going to think this is the best thing ever, or think I've completely lost the plot.
Leaning heavily into number 2. Okay, well, there you go. Thanks, Peter. I feel like we've all learned a great deal.
Sorry, everyone.
Form an orderly queue for your refund. Professor Jones, I've found this fragment of sauropod limb that offers evidence that this columnar limb model favoured by Brontosauri and others was not the sole road to the evolution of giganticism. Note the thicker bone caused by the need to support greater weight on a bendable limb.
It looks very dry.
Dry?
Yes, you're going to want to put some elbow grease on that.
Oh, very funny. Okay, Peter, well, look, there you go. Another episode down, and the eyes of the audience swivel in their sockets towards me.
Yes, let's see what you are going to get. We should wheel out the Derzolator, my friend.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, here it comes.
Okay, your place is London.
Yes! London! All right.
There's time for this to all go wrong yet, don't worry.
My old neck of the woods.
Okay, your time period. It's the Roman Republic.
Right.
That is 509 to 27 BCE.
Okay.
And your topic, sir. Bigger than an elephant.
Okay. Bigger than an elephant. Well, it's like this episode. Bigger than a titanosaur.
A giraffe a titan.
Okay, so bigger than an elephant in London during the Roman Republic.
That's the one.
All right, well, Peter, I will find you something that is bigger than an elephant in London during the Roman Republic.
Excellent.
Wish me luck.
Good luck, my friend.
Okay, well, look, there you go. That is our show for this week. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things that we've talked about on this show, or just to say hello, you can reach out to us through our website at hhepodcast.com or by email at peteandryan@hhepodcast.com.
Indeedy, and we'd love to hear from you. And you never know, you might end up featured on a future show.
That's right. And if you are on Mastodon, Instagram, Facebook, or X, you can find us at HHE Podcast.
And if you subscribe to those, you'll get an alert every time we post extra content like facts we didn't use, photos from the show, pictures of the elbowy dinosaur.
I want to see an elbowy dinosaur. But we will be back again soon with
The Verdict.
But until then, a huge thanks to Professor Phil Donoghue.
Thanks, Prof.
And a huge thanks to you, Peter.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a blast.
And that is it. I guess all that's left to say now is... History happened everywhere.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Pete.
You had a phone call today. Some woman wanting to join a Yogasaurus session? What's that about?
Oh, it's my new dinosaur-themed mindfulness class.
Dinosaur mindfulness? What's that about?
Well, dinosaurs are extinct, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, when things are dead, they're said to be at peace.
I guess.
So I thought, what is more peaceful than something that's been dead for millions of years?
Right.
So we just sit and contemplate dead dinosaurs for an hour.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Okay, look, imagine you're a dinosaur.
All right, good start. I'm very powerful. I'm fierce. I like it.
A dead dinosaur.
Oh, Right.
face down in the swamp.
Oh,
Your skin and guts are being picked apart by hungry scavengers.
gross.
Years pass, burying you in tons of earth and soil.
I am a bit claustrophobic, Ryan.
Millions and millions of years pass, and all that soil and rock continue to bear down on your fragile bones.
This doesn't feel very calming, Ryan.
Your bones then calcify and turn into rock.
I thought we were supposed to relax, not stiffen.
You're dead. Your family is dead. Your friends are dead. Everyone you've ever met in your life is dead. Their children, dead. Their children's children, also dead.
This isn't helping, Ryan. I feel horrible.
And now your petrified bones are being dug up, pulled from the earth by a man in khaki shorts. Packed in a crate, you're shipped around the world and put on display in a museum. Under a glaring spotlight, everyone is staring at you. They're pointing, they're taking photos of your emaciated corpse.
Ryan, I don't like it.
And breathe.
Oh, God, Ryan, that was awful. I'm more stressed and anxious than ever.
Oh, really? Sounds like Yogasaurus isn't for you. Here, let me give you a hot coprolite massage.
Do you know what? I'm fine. Let's just leave it.
No, I picked some fresh this morning. It's still moist.
Stay back. Don't come near. No, get off me. Oh, no, it's disgusting. It's touching me. The smell. Oh, God, the smell. Oh, no. I need a shower. Ryan, I hate you. Oh, there you go. So, something to work with. Hello, lovely YouTube folks. This is a special message just for you.
Yeah, thanks for listening all the way to the end.
Now, if you enjoyed the show, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
And don't forget to take a moment to hit that like and smash subscribe.
Hit that like.
Yeah,
Smash subscribe.
yeah, that's what people say.
Do they, though?
Yeah, only the cool kids.
And you think you're the cool kids, do you?
No, we're the cool kids.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we are. All right, smash that like button, people. Smash it real good.
Oh, yeah. Nice.